Internet. 3D gaming. Do you remember when it began? I do. When I grew up on my video games, it was Nintendo. It was DOS games. Everything was two-dimensional, of course. It looked, there were tricks to make it look 3D, but there wasn't a real 3D environment to play in. Now, there was a period of gaming that I kind of missed out on because of this transition. The game's artwork had gotten so good in 2D. I hate to be a graphics snob, but I guess in a way maybe I am, because there was this time in the early days of 3D gaming where I didn't like them that much, and as a result, there's some games I missed out on. Some really what are considered now classics by a lot of people, like Mario 64 and Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Side note: that title, I don't know why nobody else laughed as much as I did at that when that came out. I mean, Ocarina of Time, really? It sounds ridiculous. I mean, as far as I know, an ocarina is this little woodwind instrument, like a recorder, kind of obscure. I don't know, it was weird. Ocarina of Time? Anyway, everybody else just... Okay, it's a game. I thought it was strange. But I didn't play those games because they looked horrible. And this is because I came off of the 2D games at the time that were looking so nice. I mean, like I said, I started out in Nintendo where, as fun as the games were, they were very simple graphics-wise. And they got better and better. And especially on the computer when I was playing adventure games like Secret of Monkey Island, I guess was the last big 2D adventure that came along. And adventure games back in that time were the ones that pushed your computer to its limits. Not like nowadays it's, first-person shooters, I suppose, would be kind of driving the tech. But adventure games at that time were big sellers and kind of at the forefront of technology too. So we had games like this where the hand-drawn art was getting so good. The games would grow in size a little bit, but all it was doing was storing these large works of art that people were making. Hello, cat. That's Django Pet. So they were looking so nice and better, and they were really immersive in that way because you would look at these great backdrops and these nice characters that were rendered by really good artists, and it was a really nice experience to play. And then 3D came along, and while it was exciting, it was very primitive because you couldn't have high-resolution textures like we have now. You had to start off with very simple geometry and low-resolution textures to get anything to work in a 3D space. So, of course, the first 3D game, as far as I know, is Catacomb 3D. And then after that came Wolfenstein from id Software. Now, id really pushed the 3D technology. We have John Carmack to thank for that, and the other guys there at id. By the way, if you ever get the chance to read, if you're interested in this sort of thing, read the book. What's it called? Masters of Doom. Masters of Doom is a great book. It's all about how id Software started up. It's the backstory of John Carmack and John Romero, mostly, how they built the company, about shareware, how significant that was back in the day. Really good book. And it talks about the birth of these games. And when they came out, they were fantastic too. I loved Wolfenstein. I played a lot of that. Doom. I stayed up many a night, all night long, playing Doom and Doom 2. When Doom 2 came out, in fact, I built my first computer so I could play this game, which is really exciting. I had a job at the time, so I was earning a bit of money. And I went through the magazines and newspapers to pick out the components I wanted. I was going to build a gaming machine. Okay, this is my 486 DX2, I think. Pretty high-end machine. This is before the Pentium came along. So my dream was to play Doom 2 at full screen, which meant the screen wouldn't be shrunk down like this. It would be the full screen, okay? Because to get better performance, there wasn't any graphical things you could turn off. It just shrunk the screen. I don't know if you guys have played Doom. Probably most of you have. But, So that was a big deal for me. And so what it is, I all the computer stores were kind of clustered in the same area as Broadway Street in Vancouver. So I would go. This is on the day I had to work. I was working at KFC at the time at 5 o'clock. That was when my shift started. And so before that, I had time to go and do my computer shopping. So I went down the street and I picked out all my components. I went and bought my keyboard, my ATI graphics card, my case, everything separately, and I went home and didn't have time to put it together. I had to go to work that night, which was really sad. So I was at work and all I was thinking, oh man, I want to put this together. I think the only thing I had time to do before I went into work was wire up the little circuit board that created the numbers on the front where it said 66 megahertz, a little like an alarm clock type display. And then the rest I had to wait until midnight when I was finished work to get home and put together. But oh, that was fun. So I got it together. I got up and running after a few problems with the hard drive. And I stayed up playing Doom 2 until 8 in the morning. And I just kept playing and playing and playing. Finally, I realized what time it was because I was seeing the sun come up through the window outside. This is in sort of it was a lower room in our townhouse, and there was a little window at the top, and the sun was coming in. And I realized this is ridiculous. I gotta sleep, and I wasn't gonna have time to finish the game even after that many hours. So I turned it off and I started walking upstairs, and I started feeling a little queasy. I don't get motion sickness, but I guess after 6 hours of playing Doom 2 in the middle of the night, I guess it wasn't good for me. And yeah, I remember my stepmom coming downstairs to put on a pot of coffee to go to work in the morning, saying, "Oh, you're up pretty early." No, I'm just going to sleep now. But getting back on topic, those games looked okay; they were passable. But when people got more ambitious and built games like GoldenEye and Zelda, and also putting on the consoles, you didn't have the horsepower of the PC behind you. So the Nintendo 64 for me was very underwhelming. The only game I was interested in was Shadows of the Empire, which I bought from my older brother, and we played a bit, and until he returned the whole thing because he wasn't really that into it. He's older than me. But yeah, I mean, unlike PC, the games were all right, but. Anyway, 3D was new, so everything had to be 3D, even if it didn't need it. Do you remember Lemmings 3D came out at that time, and all these other games that just didn't need to be 3D? They did make another Monkey Island that was in 3D. It didn't need to be. It was very clunky to control. And going back to Monkey Island 3, Curse of Monkey Island, there was even an option in the settings where you'd go in and there's a little checkbox for 3D acceleration, and it was a joke. So you'd click it, and it would say, "There is no 3D acceleration in this game. We're just kidding," which is kind of funny. They were joking about this trend, and then you'd click it again, and it would change the text and say, "No, really, there's no 3D." Click it again, and it would change. So it would say something like, "You can click that button all day long. It's not going to do anything." And there were about, 8 different things it would say. You could keep clicking it. It would keep saying something funny every time. These guys had a great sense of humor. I mean, the attention to detail, just putting a joke in the options screen. I mean, who does that? Those guys were really brilliant, I thought. And the artwork was fantastic in that game, too. But that was the last we saw of that kind of thing for quite a while. Because going to 3D, everything had to be 3D, whether it needed to be or not. And the textures were, like I said, very bad. Everything was blocky. Just look at the games of that time. It was, what would that have been? Late 90s, I suppose? Before 3D acceleration came along, of course, too, which was shortly behind. But even then, things were not that great, and I just couldn't handle it. I mean, I wish that I did. I wish I understood it. I'd been such a gamer all that time. I had a Nintendo. I loved the Super Nintendo. I had a Genesis. I had a Game Boy. I kind of played everything. I didn't get the PC until I was 15, but I played every game I could get, and it was kind of a downer. Also at that time, all my consoles got stolen. Somebody broke into our townhouse, and they took my Sega Genesis with Sonic 2 still in the cartridge slot. They took my Super Nintendo. They took the Game Boy that I had in my bedside table drawer. They left behind my original NES. It was sitting on the floor on its side, and it was just sad to see that they took all the other things and just thought, this isn't worth it, and just dropped it on the floor. Bastards. Those scorpions. But anyway, so I kind of skipped out on gaming. I just played on the PC at that time. I didn't get an N64. I had no desire to get one. None of the games looked interesting to me. They all looked ugly and horrible. And come on, they still do. But so many people kept talking about Ocarina of Time, and I knew I was missing something. So I'm watching the Let's Play right now that Nintendo Capri Sun did of that game, because he's my favorite Let's Player, LPer, I guess. And I'm kind of seeing, it had a good story. It had the mechanics there, but to me, it's all about A Link to the Past as far as Zelda goes. That game, that's another brilliant looking 2D game. I mean, the color palette and the graphics they did on that, it just looks beautiful to me. It's probably my all-time favorite game, if not up in my top 5. But when I hold that up against Ocarina of Time, I just can't draw a comparison. Ocarina just looks terrible to me. But I'm trying to understand. I think what it is too is the timing and the generation. There's sort of a slightly younger, I don't know about generation, but group of gamers who grew up on that game. So whereas I grew up with NES and NES, Nintendo and Super Nintendo, and all those games, I know part of the appeal is playing them at the time they came out is a big part of it. The nostalgia, I was younger at the time, obviously, and that was funny. So other people, I'm sure, didn't have that timing. They grew up with Ocarina of Time. They grew up with Mario 64, and were able to enjoy them the way they should be enjoyed. It's more fair for them to judge it than me, because I came along at the time where it was in a transitional phase between 2 and 3-dimensional graphics. So they were able to appreciate those games the way they were supposed to be. So I kind of envy them a little bit, but I still think that I had such a good time with the Super Nintendo games that I wouldn't trade it. And it's just maybe 5 years ago that I think the technology's caught up. I'm just pulling that figure out of my butt, but yeah, I mean, it took a while. It took a while, I think, for the artwork to be able to catch up. Not the artwork, but the technology to be able to handle artwork in 3D, to have the nice textures that we have now, the shading. You need a lot of computing power on your graphics card and CPU to be able to pull off the visuals that we had in 2-dimensionals, in 3 dimensions, because the computer has to calculate all that lighting and everything, of course. It's not just an artist being able to draw and paint and digitally correct their work and then put that into a computer and scale it down to what it can handle. It's a whole different set of graphics, really. And I think it took a while to catch up. Now, of course, I can enjoy a 3D game. Now that I can do it, but I mean, I can't really go back. I have even tried to play Ocarina of Time and some other games, and there were some I enjoyed. I mean, on the PC we had Jedi Knight, which of course I played because I'm a huge Star Wars nut. The whole Jedi Knight series. Looking back at the first Jedi Knight now, it is blocky and terrible looking and ugly, but it did have those nice full motion video cutscenes, which to me is the closest we got to expanded universe Star Wars movies. Those were pretty good. I can still watch those. But yeah, I'd have a hard time playing that game now. And Dark Forces, although that was kind of a full 3D game, but they don't hold up. I can't really play them nowadays. But again, they were a little bit ahead because they were on the PC. We had the benefit of a little bit of acceleration. I think there's a 3D effects chip around by then. And so still, I mean, I could not stomach the N64. I just had to skip that whole generation. But here we are now. Everything's looking good, and it seems to be plateauing a little bit too. I mean, it was a few years. The last time I upgraded my PC was for Crysis 1, and I haven't really had a need to upgrade it since then because everything runs alright. And I could even take a game from the Xbox 360 and play it on the PC. It doesn't look that much. Okay, it does. It looks better on the PC, but there's not a gaping difference. There's not a huge leap between them. So, anyways, that's my thoughts on the transition from 2D to 3D gaming. Just sharing my thoughts. I wonder if you guys have any thoughts about that. Do you tell me about the N64? What did I miss? What I'm probably being a graphics snob, I guess. But how do you guys feel about that? Do graphics matter? Did they matter at the time? Do they matter now? Do you have any fond memories of things that you enjoyed at the time, but looking back now, you can't go back and play them? I know there's a few other games I could think of like that, but let me know.